And welcome back. Well, every day we hear about news that's too hard to even imagine. But what if it was your job to deal with tragic situations day after day?
John Hyatt is the president and CEO of Impact and Impact 211. He's here as part of a special trauma series presented by Impact 211 in partnership with Bader Philanthropies. And we're so grateful to them for making all this information possible. Great to see you.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Let's talk first about, it's a term, a lot of people are familiar with PTSD, for example, post-traumatic stress disorder is something we especially associate with war veterans. What is second-hand trauma? How do you explain it?
Second-hand trauma happens when people that work in the helping profession are assisting those people that have experienced trauma. So in the retelling of the trauma and talking through the issues and through the helper's own empathy, you can't help but absorb some of the emotion and intensity from those events. It's almost like secondhand smoke. You can't help but breathe it in.
So talk about that, because that's what's happening in these call centers, right? At 211, they're getting the calls and they're listening in, they're responding all day to these crisis situations. So how do they manage it all? Because just in terms of taking all that in, it's not something you leave at the office all the time.
Absolutely. So it's in the call center. It's also the counselors in the office. And as you say, whether it's 6 times a day or in the call center 30 times a day or 50 calls in a day, where you're just listening to people who are desperate, people who have been through trauma, and people who need so much. And then again, how do you leave that at the office, or what's your sort of mindset and how do you cope with it? And so we encourage people to think about their own, like you were talking about, how do you have a good Monday? Well, how do you manage your stress and how do you manage the work? It's an occupational hazard. So have your stress management plan, have an awareness of what your own sort of trauma history is, what your own triggers might be. Notice when you're not yourself, so you're more irritable, you're not concentrating as well, you're not sleeping as well, your appetite's changed. People are saying, are you okay? You don't quite seem yourself. And then you think about, okay, now I need to adjust and I need to think about what's my plan and how do I help myself. Many people in the profession even have their own counselor that they might see regularly.
Well, I think of even police officers, firefighters. I mean, people don't, you know, you think very easily about those professions. You don't think about the therapists and the call center, first responders and all that. So let's talk about how it can affect others then and what kind of symptoms. You mentioned a few, but what other symptoms can you really look for to know that you have secondhand trauma?
So oftentimes you're experiencing some of the same symptoms that people that have been through trauma are. So you're feeling depressed, you're not able to sleep as well, you have these intrusive thoughts, you can't help but think about some of what you've heard. And so it's replaying in your head, you're going over that, and so that's some of what people experience.
We talked about second-hand trauma. There's also something that's called secondary trauma. Is it the same thing?
People often use those interchangeably.
So those terms are the same. If people can experience this in everyday life too. You don't have to work, and I think that's your point. You don't have to work in a crisis call center to experience this second-hand trauma.
School teachers, guidance counselors, child welfare workers, just being a good friend, and helping somebody that's been through trauma, you experience that too.
Be affected.
How do you safeguard against it? What do you do to, as you said, serve yourself and kind of protect yourself in ways, or recognize it in yourself and get better?
So know yourself, and then help have other people be an informant for you. So you have a friend or you have a spouse, you know, when you see me like this, whatever it is, let me know. And so again, I can think about how do I manage that.
I feel like you got to be really in touch with yourself to do that. And a lot of people, sometimes we don't take the time to care for yourself if you're in a caregiving profession.
And as a caregiver, you just have to know. Otherwise, then you hear compassion fatigue and burnout. And so many people leave the field and they do something completely different because they just can't take it anymore.
You talked about some of the training. We talked about it during the commercial break that you've had, and talking to people. And I think sometimes we forget the way that people are traumatized. You think about the victims of a situation, but you think we have to remember that other people are witnessing things that can be very traumatic, whether it's a car accident, or I even think about children who are home maybe when a parent has a heart attack or things like that.
there's all kinds of those things that happen kind of every day. When my kids were small and I was taking them to a child care worker, her and her daughter were in a parking lot and witnessed a person being pinned between two cars. And so, I mean, you just kind of never know where it's going to come from. And the daughter really struggled with that.
And
those
the
visuals.
fear that you would have.
Yep.
Yeah.
Fear and anxiety, which again are really common
with secondary trauma.
So people know, again, because it's such a great resource, 211, who uses it, who should call it, what do you do for people?
Everybody should use it and everybody should call. It's the broadest scope of family health and social services. So it's things from trauma, but it's also mental health, substance abuse, looking for food, housing. You've got a kid with special needs, you've got a parent that's trying to live independently in the community. All of those things.
It's free. It's a free service?
Free, 24 hours a day. You can call in, you can text us, you can chat, you can search
text too.
You can text too.
I didn't realize that.
I didn't know that
I didn't
either.
know you could text.
That's great.
And you have the ability to connect people with community resources, right? If it's
we do.
The person who answers the call tries to help, but they also have access to a wide variety of community services to get people housing, food, all those different things.
We have the largest database in the state. We've got more than 25,000 resources that are here locally. When you dial 211 in the 9 counties in southeastern Wisconsin, it rings in our office.
It's incredible.
And the only way you can do all that is through dollars. So we need people to go to your event that's coming up this week. Molly, you'll be there, correct?
Yes, I'm looking forward to it.
So you can do it. It's Higher Ground, the Trauma Epidemic event. It's Wednesday the 8th, this Wednesday at the Wisconsin Club from 5:30 to 7:30. To receive your reserve your seat today, just go to the website impactinc.org or call 414-302-6624. And for help, if you would like to call 211 or pass it on to someone who may need a referral to a service, Crisis Call Center is at 211. Also, you can text it as well. Thanks so much for being here, John.
And tickets still available for Wednesday night?
Tickets are still available.
Wonderful.
Great.
Yeah, thank you so much. We appreciate it.